Hello, welcome to a closer look at storytelling. Take me with you. Now, my comfort zone as an author, storyteller is on the written page, but many principles for writing a story that connects with readers applies to live storytelling as well, that connects with listeners. When we talk about story, we talk about characters, movement, setting, or in everyday language, people taking action in the world. And the basic story unit is a scene. The scene is who is doing what and where are they doing it. And you can think in terms of film, or television. We're used to seeing the camera taking a wide panoramic shot, and then it comes in maybe on a couple of characters and maybe moves inside to another intimate room, more intimate space. So these are different scenes where different actions take place. So the basic story unit, as we're organizing our story, is the scene. Of course, what listeners want from a storyteller is, wherever you're going, take me with you. Now, we know that the goal of our storytelling is to make the listener care. And we know that we want to create connection between the listener and the storyteller. One way of thinking about that is to bridge from what a listener knows to something new. Which is your story that you're sharing. And of course, what the listener knows is his experience in the world that he brings to the experience. One tool for helping to make that bridge, to create that connection, is sensory detail. Sensory detail helps to connect with the imagination, to create a vivid experience, and it makes it more memorable for the brain. So remember, in our last video we were talking about the Bab at Maku in his mud-walled cell where he stayed during the sweltering summer and in the cold of the freezing winter when water froze in droplets on his face. Those are just, a handful of small sensory details that help to draw the reader in, that create the beginning of the connection. So let's consider Baha'u'llah revealing the hidden words on the banks of the Tigris River. When you read about that, we set the scene of the quiet places of the Tigris River, away from the busy traffic, where birds are making their nests in the reeds along the riverbank, and the breeze rustles through the leaves of the tall palm trees. The Baha'i carpenters have built a hut for Baha'u'llah with roof of palm leaves and thorn bushes, and Baha'u'llah himself can be seen walking in his red robe along the banks of the Tigris. So these are just a handful of sensory details, but this could be a nice introduction, for example, to reading some of the hidden words at a devotional or a feast or another gathering. Now, perhaps you want to tell the larger story of the impact that the hidden words have on the Babis in Baghdad when Baha'u'llah revealed them. So your first scene is Baha'u'llah revealing the hidden words along the banks of the Tigris. Our second scene could be that bakery scene, where during the day the bakery is filled with the noise of the grinding stone and the heat of the ovens and the fragrance of warm bread. But at night, when it's all quiet, a small group of Babis would gather around an oil lamp, and some of them would read the hidden words while the others listened. So this is a scene of the Babis taking in the hidden words that Baha'u'llah has revealed. Then, of course, they want to enact them in their lives, to raise their standard of behavior, and to encourage one another in this process. So we have, a story around that, and another scene of the joyous feasts that the Babis have in this process, and the fact that Baha'u'llah would come sometimes to the feast and sprinkle rose water on the believers and enjoy the things that they were sharing at the feast. So here is another scene, and you have that movement from Baha'u'llah revealing the hidden words to the Babis receiving them, to the impact that it has on the community and the transformation of both individual and community Babis. Now, another thing that is an engine in the story that drives it, that keeps engaged a reader or a listener, is the story question, what will happen next? An action is taken, there a reaction, there are consequences. what is going to happen next creates a little tension, and it's the kind of thing that keeps us engaged. And connected to that, the story question, what is at stake? Well, certainly as we're reading these stories of the Bab and Baha'u'llah and all of the early Baha'i believers, there is life at stake, there is the cause itself. Will it survive? Will it be extinguished? And even if intellectually we know, yes, these people, there is, the cause survives and so on, we want to know in detail what happened in this situation. Certainly, episodes around the Sea of Shawl call these questions to the fore. Baha'u'llah is brought and cast into the Sea of Shawl, and he is taken from the heat of the August day into the cold and dark and filthy dungeon of the Sea of Shawl. And on top, in the city on top that you can see here, there were terrible things going on. Babis being executed. The Baha'u'llah's family has had to flee their home and be in hiding because he has been taken away. And in the Sea of Shawl itself, we know that the highlight in this is the appearance of the radiant maiden to Baha'u'llah, and the beginning of his divine mission as the manifestation of God. But there are other smaller stories related to this this time around the period that Baha'u'llah spent in the Sea of Shawl. For example, when Baha'u'llah is first incarcerated there, he wants to uplift the spirit of the Babis, and he has them chanting the sacred verses back and forth, and they become so enthused in that chanting that the sound of it reaches the palace of the Shah. So you have two scenes here and what goes on there. You have a very lovely story of Baha'u'llah giving loving support and encouragement to one of the Babis who wakes one night and shares a dream with Baha'u'llah that he's had, and what Baha'u'llah tells him about that. And the next day that man is called forth to meet his death, and the support that Baha'u'llah gives him even in that terrible place. So certainly what happens next, what is at stake, is brought to the fore in the episodes around this very difficult and terrible time. So that brings us to whatever story you choose to tell. Think of it in terms of scenes. How many scenes are in that story? Who does what in each scene? Where does it take place? Is there sensory detail that you could add? And it's good to write down a phrase or a sentence that helps you remember what each story scene is. And then take time to sit with that and imagine it in your own mind. Go through it and try to create it vividly in your own mind, because that frees you up from trying to memorize just a lot of words. You don't have to memorize words and just say the same things over and over. If you have the scene strongly in mind, you can tell that story using different words in slightly different ways, at different times. Experiment with it a little bit. So this is an important part of just organizing the story that you want to tell. And of course, you want to remember this is your story. You're choosing the size of your story, small or large. You're choosing where it begins, what is the middle, what is the ending of it. You choose a story that speaks to your heart. And of course, then you need to practice it. And ideally, you practice it with someone else. As we said at the beginning, to tell a live story, you're wanting to create a connection. And so the practice, it's really good to practice it with someone else. Now, what we're talking about is, a friend who can receive it, or even better, if you have a few friends. So I know some of you are taking this course with a group, or maybe you have a few Baha'i friends or some other friends who would like to also learn how to tell stories, and you can create a very nurturing support group. You can think of this as a cocoon of support for your storytelling growth. And as you practice, you grow that story, it becomes more stronger and more beautiful until it emerges. Not only one story, but many stories can emerge from that supportive environment. So I hope you've gotten some support from this story for your storytelling, and I will meet you again in the next video that we have.